Welcome to the life and crimes of serial killers throughout time. I'm Dr. Emily Carter. Joining me, as always, is the endlessly curious James Whittaker. Before we get started, remember to like and subscribe to our show. Also, if you see the donate button and could donate to the show, we would really appreciate it, and it also helps us keep creating better content so that the channel can improve. Ready to dig into Richard Ramirez tonight, James?
Never been more ready, Emily. The Night Stalker himself. This one haunted my old newsroom for years. So let's wind back to the very start. El Paso, Texas. Richard Ramirez was the youngest of 5 kids, all born to Mexican immigrants. His father, Julian, worked the railroads. But more than that, he was, frankly, an angry, violent man. Physical abuse was routine. I mean, Ramirez pretty much grew up surrounded by fear.
Yeah, and it's not just the home life, is it? From a young age, Ramirez was exposed to drugs, marijuana and alcohol by age 10. That's already tragic, but really, the defining moment for him came courtesy of his cousin Miguel, or Mike. A Vietnam veteran, his stories were, well, not remotely appropriate for a child. Macabre is putting it mildly. And then, when Richard was just 13, or maybe 14, depending on the source, he saw Mike shoot his wife right in front of him. That's unspeakable trauma at a formative age.
That's unimaginable. And it really puts a lot in context. The violence and chaos weren't just outside influences. They were inside his own walls. You start to see these seeds being planted that later grow into something monstrous. And Emily, I always mix this up, wasn't there something about cemeteries and his dad punishing him there?
You're right. Ramirez would sleep in cemeteries to escape his father. And there are reports his father even tied him to a crucifix in a cemetery overnight. Can you imagine the psychological scars from that? I mean, the groundwork for serious pathology was all laid out before he even finished primary school.
Now, if his childhood wasn't already tough enough, you've got repeated head injuries, knocked unconscious, almost died a couple times before he turned 6. There's neurological evidence here too. He develops temporal lobe epilepsy. That can bring on aggression, hypersexuality, basically lower a person's inhibitions and impulse control. It's kind of a storm of risk factors, isn't it?
Completely. And then there's Miguel again. Mike's stories weren't just about violence. They were about domination, torture. And he'd show Richard graphic photos from Vietnam. Many psychiatrists would say that repeated exposure isn't just traumatic, it's formative, shaping obsession rather than repulsion in this case. Ramirez became fixated on the occult, death, Satanism. In fact, he began using satanic imagery as a kind of psychological shield or justification. The macabre became both his interest and his escape from pain.
It's so warped. And you know, by the time he's out of adolescence, Ramirez is isolating himself, acting out those dark fantasies. It's not a sudden break. It's years of trauma, head injuries, and increasingly twisted coping mechanisms all piling up.
So as the teenage years roll in, Ramirez starts with jobs here and there. He lands at a Holiday Inn, but quickly it's less about working and more about stealing. He steals from sleeping guests, molests children on an elevator, that's been documented, and then gets caught attempting to rape a woman in her hotel room. The charges get dropped, but the pattern is set. Violence, sexual aggression, entitlement, and no real consequences.
He's also, well, a bit of a peeping Tom. And that's not just a phase. His brother-in-law was obsessed with voyeurism, and Ramirez would tag along. I mean, that's a pretty dysfunctional family bonding activity right there. There's even animal cruelty. A telltale sign, right?
Absolutely. It's a tragically common early behaviour among serial offenders. And by age 22, he's done with El Paso. He heads to Los Angeles, which, if you trace these stories, is often where things go from bad to catastrophic. He's deep into drugs. Cocaine is his drug of choice now. Living nomadically, burglarizing for money, isolated, and his crimes just keep getting bolder.
The first murder actually predates what most people think. His earliest known victim was a 9-year-old girl, Mei Leung, in 1984. DNA linked him to the crime years after the fact. At the time, though, no one suspected Ramirez. Then came the murder of Jenny Vincow, the 79-year-old widow, just a couple months later. These weren't isolated. He started breaking into homes with the explicit goal to assault and kill, not just rob. And there was literally no preference. Age, gender, background, none of it mattered.
That's a detail that really unsettled communities and baffled law enforcement. Most serial killers have a type, a demographic. But Ramirez targeted everyone. Kids, the elderly, couples, single women, whoever was unlucky enough to be home. And as the violence escalated, his methods became more barbaric. Burglary became secondary to the thrill of the kill. News reports started dubbing him the Night Stalker. He was a genuine figure of terror for Los Angeles, and later the Bay Area by the summer of 1985.
It's chilling, right? And he managed to operate for over a year, with people locking their windows and sleeping with baseball bats or guns. The randomness was paralyzing for entire neighborhoods.
When you dig into his signature, there's almost an inventory. Blunt force trauma, stabbing, shooting, strangulation, sexual assault, necrophilia, even mutilation. Sometimes all in the same crime scene. But perhaps more disturbing, he starts leaving satanic calling cards, a pentagram drawn in lipstick, phrases like "swear to Satan" scrawled across walls. And he'd force his victims to swear loyalty to Satan themselves. That was a recurring trauma for survivors.
Those symbols, pentagrams, blood, threats, left a psychological mark on entire neighborhoods and police officers, not just survivors. Even the most hardened detectives describe scenes they'd never seen before. You have to think, if you're law enforcement in 1985, you're already overextended. Then suddenly you're facing methodical torture and ritual left at the scene. It was unprecedented brutality, like something out of a horror movie, but all real.
And that trauma? It carried on for years for some of those who survived. Law enforcement started bringing in psychological experts, just trying to understand what sort of mind could do this. It was a new kind of monster to them.
Let's talk forensics for a second. The manhunt was like something out of those old police radio dramas, except real and absolutely frantic. There were footprints, ballistics, and most famously, a pair of Avia sneakers, men's size 11.5. Detectives tracked that down, not exactly a common shoe in California at the time. The connection between the footprints, bullets, and the violence turned this into one of the largest manhunts in California history. 2 cities, Los Angeles and San Francisco, were on high alert, basically locked down with fear.
And the panic was real. Gun sales surged, people doubled up on locks, and detectives scrambled. But yes, it was ultimately persistence with physical evidence, a partial fingerprint from a stolen car, a footprint, ballistic matches. Law enforcement worked with what little Ramirez left behind, and, honestly, a bit of good timing with their system, managed to make the match. But it wasn't all high-tech. James, didn't you mention a dispatch you'd heard years ago?
Oh yeah, this was from a scratchy old tape of LAPD radio, lots of static, but I'll never forget the tension. All units, suspect at large, believed responsible for string of homicides, possible satanic connection. You could just hear the panic. Like you could almost hear the dispatcher's hands shaking while reading it out. The sense of the unknown was more frightening than anything else. That fear fed the city, but it also fueled the hunt.
In the end, it was almost cinematic. The mugshot and name get released. And overnight, his face is everywhere in California. Ramirez tries to flee, but he's recognized, chased through the streets of East Los Angeles, and finally subdued by a group of local citizens. It was basically community revenge, the city taking its fear and turning it into action.
He tried everything to get away. Carjacking, running, even assault. But regular people weren't having it. They outnumbered him, beat him pretty badly, and held him till the police arrived. There's this legendary image of the citizens standing guard over him, bruised and battered, waiting for officers. After months of horror, the relief was almost palpable in the city. I mean, that's how the Night Stalker's reign ended. Not with some SWAT raid, but with neighbors saying, "Not in our neighborhood."
Absolutely poetic, in a way. The people who'd lived in terror finally put an end to it. And it just shows. Sometimes collective fear becomes collective strength.
So now, imagine the trial. Truly a media circus. Ramirez comes in with a pentagram drawn on his palm, shouting, "Hail Satan," during his first appearance. Security had to be tightened. There were serious threats, an overheard jailhouse plan to smuggle a gun into court, a juror murdered by her boyfriend mid-trial. The drama was relentless.
And through it all, Ramirez showed not a shred of remorse. He was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, 14 burglaries, and the judge's words still echo. Viciousness beyond any human understanding. Forensic psychiatrists reviewed his courtroom behaviour. There was no affect, no recognition of human suffering, only grandiosity and, frankly, glee at the chaos.
The cost was staggering too, millions of dollars, new security measures, and months of public attention. Yet Ramirez just shrugged off the death sentence. Big deal. Death always went with the territory. Just chilling indifference.
So let's get into the psychology. Was he born evil or made that way? Psychiatrists call Ramirez a made psychopath. He scored 31 out of 40 on the Hare psychopathy checklist, so well into the range for severe lack of empathy, impulsivity, and narcissism. The debate among professionals has gone on for decades. Was it the head injuries? The abuse? Environmental factors? Genetics?
There's that idea from Dr. Michael Stone, a made versus born psychopath. All the trauma, the drug use, the cousin's influence, the violence at home. And to your point, Emily, he wasn't born sacrificing cats and drawing pentagrams. He was a frightened, traumatized child who learned to turn his pain outward. But, and I'm hedging here, since some experts suggest possible schizoid tendencies, others hint at underlying brain damage, maybe something like a psychotic disorder. Still, we can't ignore that chilling lack of remorse. He seemed to relish the infamy, so narcissism is in the mix too.
Exactly. Ultimately, the only conclusion psychologists have reached. He represents the extreme end of made evil. Nature and nurture clashing in the most tragic of ways, leaving countless victims in the fallout.
After the verdict, Ramirez spends decades on death row at San Quentin. He keeps making headlines, not for remorse, but for attracting admirers, even marrying a journalist named Doreen Leoy. Later on, he got engaged again while still incarcerated. Never repented, never really faded from the limelight. Even his death in 2013 from cancer barely brought closure. He left behind rumors of unproven murders.
And now he lives on in documentaries, Netflix, music, books. That kind of legacy, if you can call it that, says a lot about society's fascination with the morbid. We still try to decode how someone could become the Night Stalker, but perhaps, as with so many of these cases, some darkness simply remains unknowable.
All we can do is keep asking questions. That's the only way we understand, maybe prevent. Well, that's a heavy note, but an important one.
Absolutely. Thanks for sticking with us for this unsettling journey. Next time, we'll be shining a light on another shadowed chapter of true crime history. Take care, James.
Always a pleasure, Emily. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Stay curious and stay safe. Good night.